Hey, good morning, Ian. How you doing? I think big lesson for me from this is don't have a webinar on a Monday morning because it might just be you and me. Let me just put you on so you can come off mute if you want to talk.
There we
You
go.
don't.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I couldn't come off mute then when you asked me how I was, Gavin. So apologies. I was like, damn, I can't say anything.
No
Um,
worries.
listen, if there's others coming on, that's fine. If not, I'm happy to rebook for another one if that's better.
Oh, that's all right. We've got Paul on now. We'll just see how many people we get. And you get a lot of people who kind of join just to get the recording as well.
Of
So that's
course. Yeah,
fine.
yeah,
Let me
yeah.
give Paul your mic because I don't think it's going to be a busy session. Uh, so there you go, Paul. Hey, morning, Paul. Mic is muted. Let me see if I can unmute your mic for you. Oh, disable mic. Hang on. Got Tess as well. Paul.
Good morning. I'm here now.
There we go. Brilliant. Cool. We got Tess. Let me just allow Tess's mic as well. There you go, Tess. You should be able to talk when you can. So I was just saying to Ian, this could be a very sparsely attended session. I had a couple of other sessions for last week, and for personal reasons, I had to cancel them, which is always annoying. And I think the other big thing is, don't book a webinar for 9 a.m. on a Monday morning. But I know a bunch of people have signed up looking to get the recording as well. And I will put another couple of dates in the diary as well for some of the other things I wanted to cover in the previous calls. But if everyone's up for it, we'll give it a go. Here's Eduardo. Eduardo, let me allow you on mic. There we go. So we'll keep it quite free flowing. If you want to stay off mic, that's fine. If you want to jump in and talk, that's fine. If you want to put stuff in the chat, feel free to do that as well. Not a problem at all. Give it one more minute and then we'll begin. Just there we go. My last bit of coffee. Just got to make sure I'm caffeinated. Okay. Any more? Nope. Okay. I think we're good to go. So thanks everyone for joining on another miserable Monday morning. For me anyway, down here in Cornwall. I'm Gavin Kowalski. I spent the last 25 years in tech sales and sales leadership. I have sold all sorts of stuff, mobile phones door to door. I've sold cleaning and sanitary products into London hotels. I have also led and run sales teams and closed 7 and 8 figure deals involving multiple C-suite executives in different countries across Europe. But for the last 24 months, I've been running my own sales training and consulting business. And I've been fortunate enough to coach hundreds of AEs, both in person and virtually. And actually, I had a coaching call this morning with somebody in Australia. That was an interesting opportunity to get up nice and early. And what I've been able to do over that period of time is see what the absolute top performers are doing with a tool like MEDDIC, seeing what kind of like what should I call the vast majority do. And then obviously, I think at the lower end, people just don't kind of really use it properly at all. But what's interesting when I look at how the top performers leverage MEDDIC is they're not necessarily touching every single aspect of a tool like MEDDIC, but what they are doing is they're using different bits of it in interesting ways. And what I'm going to do today is talk to you through kind of 3 ways I see those top performers using MEDDIC to accelerate deals or qualify out deals quicker, to build urgency within customers, and also to make sure that they are multi-threaded at the right layer with the right people, and that they're not confusing coaches with champions, and that they're understanding where the economic bias sits and how they get the deals over the line. So it's 3 kind of key topics I'm going to kind of run through today. As it is a small session, if you've got any questions, feel free to come off mute and ask, or just put it in the chat. I have the chat box open, so hopefully I'll spot that as I get into things. But that's the plan for this morning. So without further ado, I will flip on my little screen share. So bear with me 1 second. Here we go. Right. So what you should see now, God willing, is my iPad, basically. So hopefully that's showing up. Cool. Is everything on there? Yeah, good. All right. So basically, I'm going to talk about the 3 I's. So obviously when we think about MEDDIC, I in MEDDIC, well, we've got the metrics, we've got the economic buyer, we've got decision criteria, we've got decision process. And then when we get to the I, we've got, a lot of people call it implicate pain. And then we've got things like champion as the C and competition as the C. But what I see, kind of one of the things that comes up again and again when I talk to top performers and I see what they're doing, and they don't necessarily use this language. This is language that I have used to kind of help explain what they do, is they almost view the I in MEDDIC in kind of 3 different ways. So an initial I, they call identify. So identify the pain or the problem. So what's that? So that's basically where they can look at a customer, whether that is as part of prospecting or whether that is through an initial discovery call, and see that, yes, there is a problem that we believe our product, service, or solution can solve. So we've identified it. So it might be that doing some kind of level of research, we can sit that the customer sits within our ICP, and they are well aligned with other organizations that we've dealt with before. So particularly if we're selling to their competitors, you know, we've got a really good understanding of what their competitors do and the problem they have. We can identify that they probably have a similar kind of problem. Bear with me a sec. Got the heater on, it's getting a bit too hot. So that's the first I that they see. And oftentimes, and this is where I see the difference between your top performers and the kind of the middle of the pack, is you can see the problem, you've identified the problem or the pain point that you're looking to solve, and your problem, your product or service can solve. And you jump from, okay, I've seen that they have this problem, therefore, let me start telling them about my product or solution. Let me start telling them about what I do, and let me take them on a journey. Let me qualify them in because I know they've got this issue, and let's run with it. What that can lead to is, well, the fundamental issue, I suppose, there is you're not making the implicit explicit. So what do I mean by that? So you've seen that they have this problem, but you haven't got the customer to actually reiterate back to you that there is this issue. And you see this a lot where people, because we are, you know, humans are pattern recognizing animals, right? We look for patterns and then we store them, you know, in our brain, in our spine, so that we get to the point where instead of, you know, if we're out in the wild, you know, and we see, this is going to be a really badly drawn tiger, so I apologize in advance. We see it looks like a pussycat. We see a tiger or we hear the tiger's noise. We kind of learn over time that we should be scared of that and we should have fear and we should kind of run away. We get this kind of impulse. When we're young, we don't know that. We learn it over time. The same thing happens with the problems that our products and services solve, right? We learn quite quickly when we get into an organization the kind of things that we do for people. We see it in a customer and we just jump straight to, right, I'm going to run away, or I'm going to run towards them, or I'm going to start talking about the product or service. So one of the things that the really good sellers do that I've observed is they do 2 things. So first of all, they implicate the pain. So what do we mean by implicate? Let me just check my spelling. My handwriting is dreadful, by the way, so I do apologize in advance. So implicate is different to identify in that you stand with the customer. It's almost like, imagine you standing with them and pointing towards the problem and saying, do you agree that that's a problem? You're making the implicit explicit. You're taking the customer on this journey from going, yeah, I see that's an issue for us too. Now, in our initial conversations, discussions with customers, there's a number of different ways we can do that. One of the ways that works really well, particularly in like such an information rich age, is to give examples of where we've seen it with maybe their competitors or organizations that are similar to them, to help identify by saying, look, competitor A struggled with this. This is something you might well struggle with too. Does that sound right? So you're going from this thing where you think, okay, we think we've identified the problem, we think we know what it is, through to actually, okay, let's implement it, implicate it. Let's stand next to the customer, and we can both together kind of look at the problem and kind of say, yeah, like that's an issue over there that we're going to need to deal with. So they make the implicit explicit. So like I said, one way of doing it is by pointing to others. The other way to do it, the kind of more traditional way, the way that we would have been taught if you are kind of my age, you know, knocking on the door of 50, learn things like spin selling and value selling as part of your sales training, would be to use sort of a set of questions to kind of like, as I like to call it, peel the onion in terms of, you know, are you seeing this? What does that mean? What are the implications of that? How would that hurt if you didn't solve it? So on and so forth. But fundamentally, you go from the point of making the implicit explicit. Okay, so that's kind of part two. That's the second thing they do with the I. And then the third thing, which, and again, this is something that the best do really well, and they find really kind of clever ways of doing it. And they do it not just once, but they do it several times throughout the sales process, is they irritate. If I spelled irritate wrong, I apologize. Irritate. I don't know. Still, I haven't had enough coffee. I've only had a little bit of coffee, so my spelling is going to be below par. They irritate the pain or the problem. So you've got this 3-stage. We've seen what the problem is. Tick. We've agreed with the customer that it's a problem. We've made it explicit. Tick. Now we need to try and make it urgent, something that they need to solve. And so irritating pain, like tweaking pain, taking something that's an issue and kind of tweaking it a little bit more. This is where you ask those, I'm going to loosely call them impact questions. Now, one of the things I've tried to do of late is avoid using the word impact because it can sound a bit cheesy. It can sound a little bit salesy. It can sound a bit like you've been on kind of a Miller Hyman course and you're kind of straight in there and you're in front of the customer with all your sales training, trying to demonstrate that you're great. So I look for other softer ways of trying to irritate the pain by saying, what's the impact of that? So things like the knock-on effect. So, you know, if you want to solve that, what would be the knock-on effect of that for you, for the rest of the business? You can put some time frames around that. What would be the knock-on effect in 6 months to a year? So you can start to create this, and I'm sure some of you have heard the phrase, the cost of inaction. Start to actually build, you know, what happens if you don't solve it. Okay. As well as knock-on, I do still like implications. What are the implications of not addressing this? What are the implications if you don't address this within this period of time? So there's two kind of nice ways of asking impact questions. And then in terms of actually getting to some kind of, you know, real cost of inaction, so real kind of metrics or quantifying around it, it's just as simple as, could you measure that? So one of the things I find it's quite interesting as well when you talk to sellers about metrics, they often find, or I often find the kind of metrics a lot of people get are quite wishy-washy, quite kind of high level, average, maybe not quite sort of where they need to be. But then I also find it quite interesting when talking to customers and asking for metrics myself. A lot of the time, customers don't necessarily understand their own metrics that well. They don't have a handle on them. They don't have those kind of key KPIs just to be able to trip off their tongue. Now, the higher up an organization you get, the more likely that is to happen. But at some of the kind of mid layers that most of us end up entering accounts in and spend a lot of our time before we get access to the C-suite, actually, a lot of the time, they're not going to be that clear on the metrics. And that can go one of two ways. That can either get them to kind of cramp up, shrink up, not want to actually share because they're conscious that they don't know something maybe they should. Or you can use it as an opportunity to help kind of explore what those metrics look like, to try and start to create some numbers around this pain and this problem and getting to this cost of inaction. And there's a couple of different ways you can do that. You can use competitor metrics. So you can talk about what the competition might have measured. And this is a good example if you're selling into a quite well-defined niche, for example, like financial services, for example, or healthcare or insurance, where a lot of those kind of metrics are the same. Or you can just be more general and start to kind of build in and suggest things. So actually what you're doing by suggesting there is you're prompting them to think, is that a metric for me or is that not? You're kind of testing them. And actually what you often find is when you start to test and suggest, people will correct you, which will get you closer to where you need to go. But it's one of those interesting things I've always found is that customers aren't necessarily always as aware of their own metrics as maybe they might be. So you've got the three I's. You've got this idea that you identify the problem, the pain from a distance. You can identify it with the customer, but you make the implicit explicit by standing with the customer saying, yeah, that thing is a problem. You agree that it's a problem. And then we irritate it by actually trying to ask some impact questions to create some kind of urgency around it as well, to actually create some level of discomfort about the thing that they are they're dealing with. And one of the things that I suppose a lot of us get taught certainly early on is about using ROI as a metric, as a way of saying, look, you are this is our graph, you're kind of here today. Actually, let's not do that. You're here today. You know, if you followed your competition, you could be here tomorrow. So how amazing would that be if you went from here to here? And that gives you your ROI metric. But actually what motivates people much greater than the opportunity to gain is the fear of loss. So we're better off talking about, look, if you don't fix it, this is the trajectory you're on. You're going to end up over here. All while your competition are kind of chugging on in that direction and the gap widens. So creating this kind of cost of inaction discussion as part of irritating the pain generates urgency, it generates thought. The other thing it does really well is it tests whether you're talking to a serious person. So I don't know how many people have seen Succession. Can you just put a 1 in the chat if you've seen the TV show Succession? Just be interesting to see. Because one of the things in Succession, just towards, it's kind of halfway through the final series, Ian's seen it, brilliant, somebody will get it. Eduardo, great. So halfway through the final season, they're kind of trying to figure out, why haven't you picked one of us to take over the company? And Logan Roy basically says, you're not serious people. I love you, but you're not serious people. And often that's something I think we need to realize about sometimes the contacts that we have in our organization. So the first or second contact, sometimes they might be great and really helpful people and add some value to us initially. But if they're not serious people within the organization, or if they're not serious enough, they aren't going to help us get a deal done. They're not really going to become a true champion. They're not going to give us a really true view of kind of what's going on. So asking some of those questions helps us flush out the kind of individual that we're talking to. So those are the 3 I's. Next thing I want to talk about was urgency. So before I move on from the 3 I's, any questions on that? I will take silence as being golden. So let's talk a bit about urgency then. So when having been through, obviously, the 3 I's, you've got this idea, and I'm just going to create almost like a 3x3 box to help illustrate this. There you go. You got this idea of, you know, over time, we want to identify, implicate, and irritate the pain. Okay, that's kind of what we want to do as we go through our discovery process. But it's important to understand how the customer perceives the problem. So if we imagine that kind of we're looking for business problems, right? But then sometimes problems that we can solve might not be viewed as actual real problems in the customer's organization. They might see them more as puzzles. So what's the difference between a puzzle and a problem? Oh, basically, a puzzle is a problem without any kind of urgency whatsoever. It's just there. It's something you know about and you think you might have to address or you might get into at some point, but it has no urgency because no one has associated it with a underlying business issue that is painful enough that needs addressing. So you've got this idea of puzzles, then problems. Yeah, there's a business problem there. And then at the very top, the idea of a pain. So like if a puzzle is a problem without urgency, a pain is a problem with a hell of a lot of urgency. It is something that they feel viscerally. And one of the things that we need to do as we're doing our discovery calls, as we're looking at our ICP, is trying to figure out the thing that we solve. You know, where does it currently sit on this spectrum for the customer? Does it sit down as being a thing? It's like, oh, yeah, no, I need to get to that. So for a good example, you know, I have Velux windows, one of them leaks. So it's a problem every time it rains. It was a pain during the storms, but most of the time it's just a puzzle. It's like a, yeah, all right, I need to get around to that at some point. So what we need to do is establish where this sits for the customer we're talking to, but also it's going to change by individual. So if we're talking to somebody who sees this as an absolute pain, a must solve, where does that person sit in the decision-making process? Where is their authority levels? How close are they to power, authority, and making a decision? Or is it just something that really grinds on them that they want to solve and actually nobody else sees? So actually, and I saw somebody do this. Well, I didn't see them do it live. I heard it on a call recording, and they actually asked the customer, you know, is this a puzzle, a problem, or a real pain in the neck? And the response was kind of interesting because you get, you know, when you hear those three words, you get almost an instant response as to actually, well, it's a bit of a problem. Actually, well, yeah, no, puzzle, maybe something we'll deal with. Or you get, yeah, look, it's a pain. We need to solve it. We need to solve it right now. So this is where our understanding of our customer, our customer's market, this is where our use of examples like our competition and where they sit. And this is where asking great questions, kind of knock-on effects and trying to build a cost of action, cost of inaction, sorry, is a great way to help move this up and down the dial to try and get from, you know, say a puzzle that we both agree is a problem to actually something that's painful that we kind of irritated, making that kind of leap. And again, the way we do that is through using a really strong set of questions by peeling the onion on the problem, the underlying issue, who's involved, and doing that bit kind of really, really well. But just understanding as you go in, which of the decision makers in the organization you're talking to view this as, you know, a problem, a pain, or a puzzle. It's going to give you a really good view on actually, can I get across all these decision makers? Is it achievable to change their mind? Or actually, is it something that we should probably just kind of walk away from? It helps you start to figure that out as you go through this process. So that's the kind of the urgency piece and understanding a customer urgency. And one of the things, now it's a great question that I can't remember who I stole it from. It's definitely not mine. But the question I saw this woman use was, she said, how quickly should we move on this? Because I want to match your urgency. Where does it sit in your priority lane? So that idea of asking, you know, saying I want to match your urgency and then asking where it sits is a really nice way, particularly towards the end of initial engagement, to get an idea of where these things sit for that individual. And you can then also ask that question and say, look, if I ask that question of so-and-so in procurement or so-and-so in IT or so-and-so in HR, what do you think they would say? So you can start to triangulate and figure out where those urgency levels sit. Okay, so that's urgency. So we've done the 3 I's, we've done urgency, and then we're going to talk a little bit about champion management. So the way I like to view, and I've applied names that work for me to what I've seen kind of really successful individuals do. But I sort of like to think about this kind of hierarchy of people that we speak to as obviously you've got you've got a champion. Okay, so they're what you're looking for. They're kind of at the top. Below that, you've got a coach. And then below that, you've got a fan. So what's the difference between like a champion, a coach, and a fan? In essence, they all have some kind of skin in the game in terms of wanting you to be successful, in terms of wanting the deal to happen. There'll be something in it intrinsically for them. But a champion, a true champion, I like to use the acronym AIM. They have authority, they have influence, and they are motivated. So a coach and a fan are both motivated. A coach being a bit more senior than a fan. So, a fan is probably a kind of individual contributor. A coach might be, some kind of line manager, or maybe a subject matter expert, an SME. But a champion is going to be, they're either going to be a senior manager or they're going to be up in the exec kind of leadership level, because they will be able to both influence others, influence their peers, people who work within their organizations, their teams, and they will have some kind of authority. And that might not mean that they can sign it off. That might not mean that they are the economic buyer, but they have some kind of decision-making power. They have some kind of decision-making input that enables them to actually go ahead and say, yeah, we're going to do this. No, we're not going to do that. And you are looking for somebody who exhibits all 3 of those in order to confirm you have a champion. So that's the kind of first thing. It's like we're thinking about, we're speaking to somebody, they're my champion. Are they my champion? You need to try and understand that. But the second thing you want to think about is once you have a champion, is where can I get more? Where can I get more champions? So fundamentally, having one champion is great because it means you've got somebody who can help you take your deal through the process and give you a view on things. And in smaller deals and smaller organizations, one champion might be enough. But I think, as soon as you get into the mid-market or enterprise, you are going from 5 people to maybe as much as 25 in large deals involved in a decision-making process. And you are going to have other people who have authority, influence, and are motivated with slightly different views, potentially. Maybe they're aligned to a different supplier who sits in your market. Maybe they're aligned to the existing solution. Maybe they just don't see that change is the right thing to do right now. So in terms of moving your deal forward, in terms of making sure that once you get past that initial kind of discovery phase, you build momentum and you can expand and continue the deal to grow, finding multiple champions becomes really important. So you need to start thinking about where in the organization I'm talking to am I going to find them? Can you find them in unusual places as well? So a lot of the companies I speak to and work with, and certainly in my career, have sold into IT. So you'll be thinking about, IT organizations. Maybe you've got an IT manager. Maybe you've got CISO. Maybe you've got somebody who leads networking. Maybe you've got somebody in procurement, who actually is involved from a buying perspective and typically gets involved. All of these 3 type of personas may well be qualified as a champion. But if you're only speaking to one of them, you're only speaking to the IT manager, and you don't have an idea of what the CISO, what the person in procurement wants or needs, where they might go, that exposes you. So reaching out, engaging, thinking about those different personas and what's important to them, and engaging with them proactively is a really important part of building out multiple champions. And also identify, it gives you that good view of, so like, what's the landscape of the decision-making situation, for a better phrase, within the organization you're selling with, because you might find that actually there is a really, you're speaking to the IT manager, and actually he or she is just a really great coach. They aren't actually able to they're not really properly a champion. And probably the person to speak to might have been the CISO or somebody who the IT manager worked in. So maybe sometimes in organizations you get IT reporting into operations. So maybe there's somebody in operations you could have been speaking to. But taking a critical view of the people that you're speaking to, identifying who are your champions, who's really more realistically a coach. And my guidance would be always downplay it. Never assume they're a champion. Assume they're a coach until they can demonstrate to you that they're a champion by getting kind of things done. It'll be obvious which ones are fans as well, because they won't really be able to get much done. They might be able to give some insight and some guidance. They might be quite excited about it, but beyond that, there's not going to be a lot they can do for you. But it's this kind of confusion between champion and coach that we need to just try and watch out for. So, 3 I's. I'll run back through these again real quickly. Identify, implicate, and irritate. It's that level of like, I've seen it. Implicate is I've seen it with the customer and they agree with me. Irritate is we've identified what will happen if they don't solve it. We've tweaked that kind of pain. Urgency, thinking about puzzle, problem, and pain. So how do you go from, how do you establish whether the problem that you can solve is seen by the customer as just a puzzle, something that they might need to deal with at some point, or as a bleeding neck pain that they absolutely need to address? What is going on that might create that? And then in terms of champion management, really understanding that there's a key difference between a coach and a champion. Always assuming someone's a coach before they demonstrate they're a champion, then figuring out how can we have more champions? Where can I go? Not just within the part of the business I'm speaking to, but in other parts of that business to get support for what I'm doing and what I'm trying to go. So those are the 3 kind of things that kind of stand out to me when I look at some of the top sellers that I've worked with over the past 24 months. They understand what their role is in terms of seeing, implicating, and surfacing pain and questioning it to kind of try and generate urgency. They understand one of the most important things, because and this is a weird analogy, but like, you can be the best surfer in the world, but if there are no waves, you're just going to be standing on the beach. That's the idea about puzzle, problem, pain. If the thing you solve is not at their top table, their top list of priorities, there's probably very little you can do. You can try, but there's probably very little you can actually do really to influence it. And oftentimes it's better to take a step back, nurture that prospect, and then come back to them when they start to realize that there's a problem there. And then champion management. It's the idea that don't get suckered into thinking a coach is a champion. Make sure they have authority, make sure they have influence, and make sure they're motivated. And try and cultivate and develop multiple ones of them. Not just within the part of the business you're speaking to, but other parts of the business as well. That's where multi-threading comes in and becomes really powerful. Because if you have 2 or 3 champions, along with another 3 or 4 contacts, all of a sudden you've got a really powerful network within an organization to try and drive your opportunity over the line. So those are the 3 things I wanted to cover today. Those are the 3 things that kind of stood out to me when like I said, I took 24 months worth of discovery calls and I pushed them through ChatGPT, when I've spent time listening to my clients' cold calls and discovery calls to see what they've done that is different. Thank you very much for spending some time with me this morning. I appreciate it's 9 a.m. on a Monday morning in the UK. If you have any other questions or anything you'd like to poke out a product from what we've discussed there, then let me know. Put a 1 in the chat, put your hand up, come off mute. It's up to you. And if not, then thank you very much for your time. and I hope you have a fantastic week.
Thanks, Gavin. That was really useful. Really enjoyed it. Thank you very
Brilliant.
much.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks,
Take
Eduardo.
care. Have a good day.
Guys.
See you later.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.